I never told my son about my $45,000 monthly salary. Not when he was 6 and asked why we couldn't buy the expensive sneakers. Not when he was 16 and worked summers to save for college. Not even now at 33 when he still thinks his mama is just another office worker scraping by in a one-bedroom apartment on the south side of Chicago. My name is LaToya Williams. I'm 58 years old and I've been hiding in plain sight for over 3 decades. Let me be clear, I'm not poor. I'm the vice president of regional operations for one of the largest telecommunications corporations in America. I manage $400 million in annual budget. I oversee 12,000 employees across 4 states. I sit in boardrooms where decisions get made that affect millions of people's lives. The men in those rooms, and yes, they're mostly men, call me ma'am, and wait for my approval before they breathe too loud. But my son Jamal, he thinks I answer phones and file paperwork in some anonymous office building downtown. And I let him believe it. I live in the same modest apartment I've had for 22 years. The furniture is old but comfortable. A couch I bought secondhand in 2003, a coffee table with water rings I never bothered to fix, walls decorated with Jamal's childhood drawings instead of expensive art. I take the bus to work most days carrying my lunch in a worn canvas tote bag that's probably older than some of my employees' children. My work clothes come from discount stores. My winter coat has been faithfully serving me since Obama's first term. People see me and make assumptions. The young associates at work think I'm cute in that condescending way people reserve for older black women who don't fit their idea of executive presence. The neighbors in my building think I'm probably a secretary or maybe a cafeteria worker at one of the universities. Even the doorman at my office building used to direct me to the service entrance until my assistant, bless her heart, had to intervene. I let them think what they want. Because real wealth whispers, fake wealth shouts. I learned that lesson 35 years ago when I was 23, pregnant and terrified. Jamal's father took one look at that positive test and disappeared like smoke. My own family, they told me I'd made my bed and now I'd have to lie in it. So there I was, broke alone and stubborn as hell. I worked as a secretary at a small telecommunications company until the day before Jamal was born. I was back at my desk 2 weeks later, pumping breast milk in the bathroom during lunch breaks, leaving my baby with Mrs. Chen next door, who charged me $20 a day I could barely afford. I ate ramen for dinner so Jamal could have fresh fruit. I wore shoes with holes in them so he could have new ones for school. But I didn't just survive. I studied. Every night after Jamal went to sleep, I'd sit at our tiny kitchen table with library books about business finance and telecommunications technology. I taught myself Excel and PowerPoint before most people knew what they were. I learned to code basic programs. I took free online courses in management theory. I climbed. Secretary to administrative assistant. Assistant to coordinator. Coordinator to manager. Manager to director. Director to VP. It took 23 years, but I made it. And you know what? Nobody handed me a damn thing. Every promotion I earned with 60-hour work weeks and presentations that made grown men nervous. Every raise I negotiated myself walking into offices where I was the only woman and definitely the only black face demanding what I knew I was worth. Now I'm sitting on investments that could buy my whole apartment building twice over. My retirement accounts could fund Jamal's children's educations. I could quit tomorrow and live comfortably until I'm 100. But I still ride the bus. I still pack my lunch. I still wear the same coat. Because I needed Jamal to learn what I learned, that worth isn't measured in dollars. That character gets built in struggle. That the best things in life are the ones you earn yourself. Or at least that's what I told myself. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was in my office, a corner space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Not that Jamal had ever seen it, reviewing quarterly reports when my personal cell buzzed. "Hey, Mama." Jamal's voice had that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over 3 decades of motherhood. The one that meant he needed something, but wasn't sure how to ask. "Baby, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, He paused. I heard muffled voices in the background. "Mama, I need to ask you a favor." I set down my pen, giving him my full attention. "Go ahead." "You remember Keisha's parents, Patricia and Raymond. The ones from Atlanta. The ones you said were, what was the word you used, fancy?" He laughed nervously. "Yeah, them. Well, they're coming to Chicago this weekend. First time visiting since the wedding. They want to meet you properly. Have dinner together. As a family." My fingers tightened around the phone. In the 2 years since Jamal and Keisha got married, I'd only met her parents briefly at the wedding, a quick handshake in a receiving line, barely 5 minutes of small talk. They'd flown in the morning of and left right after the reception, citing business obligations. "Where were you thinking?" I asked carefully. "They made reservations at the Sterling Room, Saturday at 7. The Sterling Room. I knew the place, a 5-star restaurant in the Gold Coast, the kind where entrees start at $80, and the wine list requires a sommelier to translate. I'd been there exactly once for a corporate dinner where we'd closed a $12 million deal. "That's a nice restaurant," I said neutrally. "I know it's expensive, Mama, but they're paying," they insisted. Another pause. I just need you to be there, please." Something in his voice made my chest tight. My baby boy, my strong, kind, hard-working son, sounded almost apologetic. "Jamal," I said slowly, "what did you tell them about me?" Silence. "Jamal, I told them you work in an office," he finally said. "That you live alone, that you're simple, that you don't have much." There it was, simple. As if my entire life could be reduced to that one word. As if the 35 years I'd spent building a career, the millions of dollars in revenue I'd generated, the thousands of lives I'd impacted, all of it meant nothing compared to my old coat and discount store dresses. But what hurt more was the shame underneath his words. My son was embarrassed of me. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I'll be there." "Really, you're not mad?" "Of course not, baby. I'd love to meet Keisha's parents properly." After we hung up, I sat in my executive chair looking out at the skyline of Chicago. The city sparkled in the late afternoon sun, glass towers reaching toward the clouds like crystal fingers. Somewhere down there, in a modest apartment with secondhand furniture, was the life my son thought I lived. And somewhere in Atlanta, Keisha's parents were probably packing their designer luggage, preparing to meet the poor woman who'd raised their son-in-law. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a folder I kept in the back behind the business cards and extra pens. Inside were documents I'd never shown Jamal: stock certificates, investment statements, the deed to a small house I'd bought in cash 5 years ago in a quiet neighborhood on the South Side, properties I'd purchased as rentals generating income I'd never needed to touch. Also in the folder, a photo of myself at the company's annual executive retreat, standing between the CEO and the CFO, accepting an award for highest regional performance. In the photo, I'm wearing a designer suit that cost more than my monthly rent. My hair is professionally styled. I'm smiling with the confidence of a woman who knows exactly what she's worth. Jamal has never seen this photo. He's never asked about my work beyond "How was your day, Mama?" And I've never elaborated beyond "Fine, baby." Just the usual. I closed the folder and made a decision. If my son thought I was poor, if Keisha's parents were coming to Chicago ready to judge, then I'd give them exactly what they expected to see. I'd show up to that dinner looking like every stereotype they probably already believed: a struggling, broke, simple woman, barely keeping her head above water. I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to feel firsthand how they treated someone they thought had nothing. I wanted to watch their faces, hear their words, see their true colors. Because I'd spent enough years in corporate America to know how to read people. And something about this whole situation smelled wrong. The expensive restaurant, the sudden visit, the fact that in 2 years of marriage they'd barely made an effort to know me. I had a feeling Keisha's parents were the type who measured human worth in bank statements. And if I was right, well then they were in for one hell of a surprise. I spent the next 3 days doing research. Not the kind I usually did for work, market analysis, and competitor assessments, but the kind that felt dirty, like looking through someone's medicine cabinet. Patricia and Raymond Carter. I found their social media easily enough. Patricia's Instagram was a shrine to luxury photos of designer handbags, first-class plane seats, their Mediterranean-style house in a gated Atlanta suburb. Every caption included hashtags like #blessed, #living my best life, #luxury lifestyle. Raymond's Facebook was more subdued, but still curated photos from their chain of upscale hair salons, charity galas where they posed with local politicians, vacation snapshots from Bali and Dubai. Old money numb, but definitely trying hard to look like it. I dug deeper. Public business records showed Raymond owned 4 salons in the Atlanta area. Property records showed their house a mini mansion purchased in 2018 for $1.2 million. They drove a Mercedes and a BMW, both leased. On the surface, successful, comfortable, upper middle class at least. But I'd seen enough financial statements in my career to recognize the signs of people living right at the edge of their means, maybe beyond it. The luxury items were real, but were they paid for? The house was impressive, but what was the mortgage? Those salons, were they profitable or just for show? I couldn't know for sure, but my instincts, honed over decades of evaluating business risk, were humming. Saturday arrived. I stood in my bedroom looking at the outfit I'd selected. A light gray dress I'd bought at Goodwill 3 years ago for a church function, shapeless, slightly wrinkled, despite ironing, the kind of dress that makes a woman disappear into the background. Shoes I'd worn so long the heels were worn down on one side. No jewelry except the simple cross necklace Jamal gave me for Mother's Day when he was 12. I pulled my hair back into a neat but unstyled bun. No makeup except a little powder and lip balm. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired, small, forgettable. She looked like someone you'd pass on the street without a second glance. Someone who'd worked hard her whole life and had little to show for it. Perfect. I grabbed my canvas tote bag, the one with the frayed straps and a coffee stain on the side I'd never quite scrubbed out, and headed downstairs. I'd called a regular taxi, not the Uber Black I usually used for corporate functions. The driver barely looked at me as I climbed into the back seat. "The Sterling Room, please, in the Gold Coast." He raised an eyebrow in the rearview mirror but didn't comment, probably wondering what someone like me was doing going to a place like that. As we drove through the city, I felt the strangest sensation, like I was shedding my real skin and putting on a costume. But it wasn't really a costume, was it? This was who I'd been for 3 decades in Jamal's eyes. This was the mother he knew. The taxi pulled up to the Sterling Room. The building glowed with warm light, elegant and intimidating. A doorman in white gloves stood at the entrance. Well-dressed people were walking in, women in cocktail dresses and heels, men in suits that probably cost more than my rent. I paid the driver, took a deep breath, and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The doorman's eyes slid over me with barely concealed distaste. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I'm meeting my family for dinner." He looked skeptical, but opened the door anyway. I walked through my worn shoes, clicking on the marble floor. And there they were. Jamal stood near a table by the windows wearing a dark suit I'd never seen before. He looked handsome and nervous, checking his phone every few seconds. Next to him was Keisha, my daughter-in-law, in a cream-colored dress with gold accents. Her hair was professionally styled, falling in perfect waves over her shoulders. She looked beautiful and tense. And seated at the table, waiting like royalty on their thrones, were Patricia and Raymond Carter. Patricia wore an emerald green dress covered in sequins that caught the light with every breath. Her neck, wrists, and fingers dripped with jewelry, real stones I could tell even from a distance. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo. She had that particular kind of beauty that comes from money and maintenance. Perfect skin, perfect teeth, perfect everything. Raymond sat beside her in an immaculate gray suit, a watch on his wrist that I recognized as a Patek Philippe. Easily $80,000 if it was real. His expression was serious, almost stern, like a king waiting to pass judgment. I took a small breath and walked toward them. Jamal saw me first. His eyes widened. He actually flinched, his gaze traveling from my worn shoes up to my simple dress, landing on my face, with something that looked almost like panic. "Mama," he said, his voice strained. "You made it." "Of course, baby. Wouldn't miss it." I smiled, timid small, the smile of a woman who wasn't used to places like this. The smile of someone who felt out of her depth. Keisha leaned in for a quick kiss on the cheek. It was cold, mechanical. "Mother Latoya, it's good to see you." Her eyes said something different. They said, "Please don't embarrass me." "Keisha, darling," I said warmly, "you look absolutely beautiful." Patricia looked up from her menu. Her eyes met mine, and I saw it all in that single glance. The assessment, the judgment, the disappointment. Her gaze traveled over my wrinkled dress, my old shoes, my canvas tote bag. It was the look of someone mentally calculating my worth and finding me severely lacking. "You must be Jamal's mother," she said, extending one perfectly manicured hand across the table. The handshake was brief, cold, weak, the kind you give when you don't really want to touch someone. "I'm Latoya. It's so nice to finally meet you properly, Mrs. Carter." "Patricia, please." Her smile was tight. "And this is my husband, Raymond." Raymond barely looked up. His handshake was even weaker than his wife's. "Pleasure," he muttered. No one helped me with my chair. No one asked if I needed anything. I sat down at the end of the table, the seat furthest from everyone else, like an afterthought guest. The waiter appeared with menus. Heavy leather-bound books written entirely in French. I opened mine slowly, pretending to study the words I couldn't understand, which was a lie. I'd studied French business terminology for years. But tonight I was playing a role. Patricia watched me struggle for exactly 3 seconds before she spoke. "Do you need help with the menu, Latoya?" Her voice was sweet as honey and twice as poisonous. These French terms can be quite complicated. I looked up at her with wide, grateful eyes. "Oh yes, please. I don't understand any of these words." Patricia sighed softly but loud enough for me to hear. "Why don't we order for you? Something simple." She turned to the waiter. "She'll have the chicken. The regular preparation, nothing fancy." "The chicken is $45, madame," the waiter said neutrally. Patricia waved her hand. "That's fine. We don't want to overdo it." The sentence hung in the air like smoke. "We don't want to overdo it. As in, we don't want to waste expensive food on someone who probably can't appreciate it anyway." Jamal stared at his menu. Keisha played with her napkin. Raymond nodded in agreement. And I just sat there smiling my small, timid smile, watching everything. The game had begun. Patricia took a sip of her wine, a deep red that the sommelier had presented like it was liquid gold. She swirled it in her glass, holding it up to the light as if she were a professional critic. "This wine is from an exclusive vineyard in Napa Valley," she announced to the table, though she was clearly speaking to me. "It's $200 a bottle, but when you understand quality, you don't compromise. Do you drink wine, Latoya?" I shook my head, playing my part. "Only on special occasions, and usually just the kind they sell at the grocery store. I don't really understand all these fancy varieties." Patricia's smile widened. "Oh, don't worry about it. Not everyone has a trained palate. That comes with experience with travel, she paused delicately. "Exposure to finer things." Raymond nodded sagely. "Patricia and I have visited vineyards all over the world. France, Italy, South Africa, Argentina. We've developed quite a sophisticated taste." "That sounds wonderful," I said, my voice small. "I've never traveled outside of Illinois." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. Last year alone, I'd been to Tokyo twice for business conferences, spent a week in London for a telecommunications summit, and taken a long weekend in Dubai to tour a facility we were considering partnering with. My passport had more stamps than Patricia's Instagram had filters, but she didn't need to know that. "Never left Illinois." Patricia's eyebrows rose with exaggerated sympathy. "Oh, Latoya, there's such a big world out there. It's important to expose yourself to different cultures, different experiences. It really broadens your perspective." "I'm sure it does," I replied. "I just never had the money for trips like that. Work and raising Jamal took everything I had." Jamal shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Keisha was staring at her plate like she was trying to memorize the pattern on the china. The food arrived elaborate presentations on white plates that looked more like art installations than meals. My chicken came with 3 small pieces arranged in a triangle surrounded by dots of sauce and a sprig of something green. Patricia cut into her steak with surgical precision. "This fillet is $80, she said conversationally. "But it's worth every penny. You really can taste the difference in quality meat. You can't just eat anything you know. Your body deserves the best fuel." I nodded, cutting my own chicken into tiny pieces. "You're absolutely right. So, Latoya," Raymond leaned forward, his expensive watch catching the light. "Jamal mentioned you work in an office downtown. What exactly do you do there?" Here it was the first real test. "Oh, I do a little bit of everything," I said, looking down at my plate. "Answering phones, filing paperwork, making copies. Whatever needs to be done, really. Simple administrative work." "Administrative support," Patricia repeated, as if testing how the words tasted. "That's honest work. All jobs have dignity, don't they, Raymond?" "Absolutely," Raymond agreed. "Someone has to do those jobs. Someone has to do those jobs." As if the people who did them were interchangeable parts, not human beings with dreams and stories and worth. I swallowed my chicken. It was delicious, actually. Probably the best chicken I'd had in months. But I wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing me enjoy it. "How long have you been doing administrative work?" Patricia asked. "About 35 years, I said truthfully. "Started right out of high school." Patricia's eyes flickered with something pity mixed with satisfaction. She'd just confirmed what she suspected, that I was exactly what I appeared to be. A woman who'd worked the same low-level job for decades, going nowhere, achieving nothing. 35 years, she repeated slowly. Wow, that's real dedication. Staying in the same position for that long. The implication was clear. Too simple to advance. Too limited to grow. Too small to dream bigger. Raymond cleared his throat. And you live alone, Jamal mentioned, in a small apartment. Yes, sir. 1-bedroom south side. I've been there for about 22 years now. 22 years in the same apartment, Patricia said, shaking her head. That must be difficult. At your age, still renting no real security. Don't you worry about retirement, about what happens when you can't work anymore. The question was designed to wound, and I let it. I let my shoulders curl forward slightly, let my voice get even smaller. I worry about it sometimes, I admitted. But I've saved what I can. It's not much, but I'm careful with money. I don't need a lot to be happy. Of course not, Patricia said quickly. Happiness doesn't come from material things, though. She paused, glancing at her diamond bracelet. It certainly doesn't hurt to be comfortable. The appetizers arrived, tiny portions of things I couldn't identify arranged like sculptures. Patricia's plate came with something covered in edible gold leaf. See these little gold flakes? She pointed with her fork. Only the finest restaurants use real gold in their dishes. It's a detail that separates good from truly exceptional. I made appropriate noises of amazement while Patricia continued her performance. She talked about her recent shopping trip to New York, just picked up a few things, nothing major, maybe $5,000 worth. She mentioned the luxury hotel they were staying at, $1,000 a night, but the thread count on the sheets alone makes it worth it. She name-dropped designers and restaurants and places I was supposed to be impressed by. And I played my part. I nodded. I smiled. I said how wonderful and how nice in all the right places. But I was also watching how she looked at the waiter like he was furniture, watching how Raymond checked his phone constantly, barely engaging with Jamal's attempts at conversation, watching how Keisha had gone silent, shrinking into herself with each passing minute. And I was calculating. Because here's what 3 decades in corporate America teaches you: people who talk constantly about money usually have less than they claim. Real wealth is quiet. Desperate wealth is loud. Patricia was very, very loud. You know, Patricia said, setting down her fork with deliberate care. I think it's wonderful that you did your best with Jamal. Raising him alone couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I agreed. But he was worth every sacrifice. Of course he was, Patricia smiled. Though I'm sure you wish you could have given him more. Better schools, maybe. Travel opportunities. The kind of advantages that really set young people up for success. There it was again, the knife sliding between my ribs with surgical precision. You weren't enough. You didn't give him enough. You failed him. Jamal's jaw clenched. Mom gave me everything I needed. Patricia raised her hand. Of course she did, sweetheart. I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that we all want the best for our children, and sometimes our circumstances limit what we can provide. It's no one's fault. It's just reality. Raymond nodded. We made sure Keisha had every advantage. Private schools, study abroad programs, internships with top companies. We believe in investing in our children's futures. That sounds wonderful, I said softly. When they got married, Patricia continued, we helped quite a bit financially. We gave them $40,000 for the house down payment. We paid for their honeymoon, a $15,000 trip through Europe. Because that's what family does, right? We support each other. She let that hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final blow. Were you able to help them at all? Financially, I mean, when they got married. The question landed like a bomb in the middle of the table. I gave them what I could, I said quietly. A small gift. It wasn't much, but it came from the heart. Patricia's smile was pure condescension. Of course it did. That's what matters, the thought behind it. The amount is irrelevant. Every little bit helps, right? Every little bit helps. As if my contribution had been pocket change. As if I were a charity case they were graciously acknowledging. I felt the anger begin to rise inside me, not hot and explosive, but cold and controlled. Like ice forming over a river, smooth and dangerous. But not yet. Not quite yet. Dessert arrived, more tiny, expensive presentations. Patricia ordered the most elaborate $130 for something the size of a cookie. She took delicate bites, making small sounds of pleasure with each one. Then she set down her spoon and looked at me with an expression of false concern. Latoya, I think we need to talk about something important. As family. I looked up, still playing innocent. Of course. Patricia glanced at Raymond, who nodded. This was clearly rehearsed. "We love Jamal," Patricia began. "He's wonderful for Keisha, and we've welcomed him into our family completely. But as parents, we always want what's best for our daughter. And we've been worried." "Worried," I repeated softly. "Not about Jamal," she clarified quickly, "but about his responsibilities, his obligations." Raymond leaned forward. "What Patricia is trying to say is that Jamal is at a point in his life where he needs to focus on building his future, his career, his marriage, his own family eventually." "I understand," I said, though I didn't. Not yet. Patricia reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. "You're getting older, LaToya. Living alone on a limited income must be stressful. And naturally, Jamal worries about you. He feels responsible for making sure you're okay." My heart started beating faster. I could see where this was going. "That's sweet of him," I said carefully. "It is," Patricia agreed. "But that worry, that burden, it affects him. It affects his marriage. Keisha has mentioned that sometimes Jamal seems distracted, concerned about whether you have enough money for rent, for groceries, for medical expenses." "I don't ask him for money," I said, a slight edge creeping into my voice. "We know that," Raymond said quickly. "But he's a good son. He worries anyway. And that's not fair to him or to Keisha." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "So Raymond and I have been discussing it, and we'd like to help." The word help landed like a stone in still water. "Help," I repeated. "We'd like to give you a monthly allowance," Patricia said. "Something to help you live more comfortably, so Jamal doesn't have to worry about you struggling." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "An allowance. $800 a month," Raymond said, as if he were announcing a lottery win. "That should be enough to supplement whatever you're making, give you some breathing room." Patricia smiled warmly. "And all we'd ask in return is that you give Jamal and Keisha some space. Let them build their life together without too many obligations pulling them back. Don't call too often, don't expect them to visit every weekend. Just step back a little." The silence that followed was deafening. Jamal's face had gone pale. "Mom, you don't have to—" "Jamal, let us finish," Patricia interrupted smoothly. "This is a grown-up conversation." She turned back to me. "We're not trying to buy you off, LaToya. We're trying to help everyone. You get financial security, Jamal gets peace of mind, and our daughter gets her husband's full attention. Everyone wins." I stared at her perfect makeup, her expensive jewelry, her condescending smile, at Raymond with his $80,000 watch and his barely concealed impatience, at Keisha, who was crying silently into her napkin, at Jamal, whose hands were clenched into fists under the table. $800 a month to disappear from my son's life. $800 to stop being an embarrassment. $800 because they thought that's all I was worth. I picked up my napkin, slowly dabbed at my lips, and took a long sip of water. Everyone was watching me now. Patricia with expectation. Raymond with barely concealed smugness. Keisha with shame. Jamal with desperation. And then I spoke. But my voice was different. It was no longer small or timid or apologetic. It was clear, firm, and cold as winter steel. "That's a very interesting offer, Patricia. Really, very generous of you." Patricia's smile widened. "I'm so glad you understand. I have a few questions, though," I interrupted. "Just to make sure I understand the terms clearly." Patricia blinked. "Of course. Ask whatever you'd like." I leaned forward slightly, my posture straightening. "How much exactly did you say you gave them for the house? 40,000? Yes. Patricia said, a hint of confusion in her voice. "And the honeymoon was 15,000? That's correct." I nodded slowly. "So you've invested about $55,000 in their marriage. That's quite a lot." "When you love your children, money is no object," Patricia said proudly. "Interesting." I tapped my finger on the table. "And this $800 a month, that's to make sure I stay out of their lives, to ensure I'm not a burden." Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "I wouldn't put it quite like that." "But that is what you're saying," I cut her off. "You're offering to pay me to disappear." The atmosphere at the table shifted. Patricia stopped smiling. "LaToya, I think you're misunderstanding our intentions." "No," I said quietly. "I understand perfectly." I set my napkin down on the table and looked directly at Patricia. The timid posture was gone. My shoulders straightened. My voice cut through the air like a knife. "You want to know what I think is interesting, Patricia? You've spent this entire evening talking about money. How much things cost, how much you spent, how much you have. But you haven't asked me once how I'm doing, if I'm happy, if I'm healthy, if I need company, not money, but actual human connection. Patricia's mouth opened slightly. You measured my worth from the moment I walked through that door, I continued. You looked at my dress, my shoes, my bag, and you decided I was worthless. And then you put a price on me. $800 a month. That's what you think I'm worth. You're twisting everything, Raymond interjected. We're trying to help. Help, I laughed, cold and sharp. Let me tell you what real help looks like. I reached into my canvas tote bag. Everyone watched as I pulled out my wallet, old worn leather. But from inside I extracted a card. Not my regular debit card. Something else. A black card. Heavy metal. American Express Centurion. I placed it on the table in front of Patricia. Her eyes widened. She recognized what it was. That's she whispered. A Centurion card, I finished. Invitation only. Requires $250,000 in annual spending just to qualify. $5,000 yearly fee just to hold it. There are fewer than 20,000 of these in the entire world. The silence was absolute. I earn $45,000, I said clearly. Per month. Not per year. Per month. I've been earning that for the last 18 years. That's almost $10 million in gross career income, not counting investments, not counting bonuses, not counting stock options. Jamal's fork clattered to his plate. Keisha's eyes were enormous. Raymond's face had gone slack. Patricia just stared. I'm the vice president of regional operations for one of the largest telecommunications corporations in America, I continued. I manage $400 million in annual budget. I oversee 12,000 employees. I make decisions that affect millions of people's lives. Last month, I closed a $70 million contract in Tokyo. The month before, I restructured our operations in 3 states, saving the company $30 million annually. Why? Jamal's voice cracked. Why didn't you ever tell me? I turned to my son, my expression softening. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not money. I wanted you to build character, not depend on inheritance. Money corrupts baby. I've seen it destroy too many families. I wasn't going to let it destroy you. But the apartment, Keisha whispered. The clothes, the bus. I don't need to impress anyone, I said simply. Real wealth doesn't shout. It whispers. I learned that a long time ago. I looked back at Patricia. That's why I came here tonight dressed like this. I wanted to see how you'd treat someone you thought was beneath you. I wanted to see your true colors. Patricia's face had gone from shocked to red with humiliation and rage. This is you deceived us. I gave you the opportunity to show who you really are, I corrected. And you did. Magnificently. Raymond suddenly stood up. This is ridiculous. Waiter check, please. The waiter appeared promptly with the leather folder. Raymond pulled out his wallet, extracting a gold American Express card with a flourish. He placed it on the tray with barely controlled anger. We waited in tense silence. The waiter returned his face carefully neutral. I'm sorry, sir. This card was declined. The table froze. Raymond's face went pale, then red. That's impossible. Try it again. The waiter nodded and left. Returned 2 minutes later. Sir, it was declined again. Do you have another form of payment? This is absurd, Raymond sputtered, pulling out another card. There must be an error. Patricia's hands trembled slightly. Raymond, what's going on? Nothing, he said sharply. Just a bank security thing. Happens when you travel. The waiter took the second card. Came back. I'm sorry, sir. This one was also declined. Raymond stood up abruptly. I need to call the bank. This is unacceptable. He strode away, phone pressed to his ear. Patricia sat rigid, her perfect composure cracking. I watched her carefully, and suddenly pieces clicked into place. The desperate need to flaunt wealth, the over-the-top displays, the aggressive push to control Jamal and Keisha's life. How much do you owe, Patricia? I asked quietly. She looked up sharply. What? The IRS, credit cards, business loans. How much? Her face went white. Raymond's salons. I continued, my decades of financial analysis kicking in. How many are actually profitable? How much of your lifestyle is funded by credit? That house, those cars, those vacations, are they paid for? Or are you drowning? You don't know what you're talking about, Patricia said, but her voice shook. Raymond returned to the table, his face ashen. The accounts are temporarily frozen. IRS audit. They said it would be resolved in a few days. An audit, I repeated. How unfortunate. Patricia stood up suddenly. We're leaving. But the check, the waiter started. I pulled out my Centurion card again. I'll take care of it. We don't need your charity, Patricia spat. It's not charity, I said calmly. It's a lesson. You tried to buy me off for $800 a month. This dinner is $847. Consider it a gift from a simple office worker to people who clearly need it more than I do. The waiter took my card gratefully, returned within seconds. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Everything is settled. I stood up, gathering my worn bag. I looked at Patricia and Raymond one last time. You grew up poor, didn't you, Patricia? I can see it. That desperation to prove you're not that girl anymore. That need to show everyone how far you've climbed. My voice was kind now, almost gentle. I understand. I was poor too. The difference is I learned that running from poverty doesn't mean chasing material things. It means building real security, real peace. Patricia's eyes filled with tears of rage, shame, or grief I couldn't tell. I turned to Keisha. You're not your parents, sweetheart. You can choose differently. Teach your children what really matters. Kindness, empathy, character. Not price tags. Keisha nodded, tears streaming down her face. I kissed Jamal's cheek. Walk me out, baby. Outside, the cool Chicago night air felt like freedom. Jamal took my arm. I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry for everything. Don't be, I said as he said. You needed to see this, to understand that wealth without character is just decorated emptiness. What happens now? I smiled. Now you and Keisha decide what kind of life you want, what kind of people you want to be. Your in-laws will figure out their own path or they won't. A taxi pulled up. I hugged my son tight. I love you, he whispered. Not because of your money, because of who you are. I know, baby. I've always known. As the taxi pulled away, I looked back at the Sterling room glowing in the night. Inside, 3 people were learning hard lessons about worth and value and what really matters. And I was going home to my modest apartment, my secondhand furniture, my simple life richer than I'd ever been because I'd finally stopped pretending. Real wealth, I'd learned, isn't what you have. It's who you are when no one's watching. And tonight I'd shown them exactly who I was.